So my little deal here is I just want to talk a little bit about what I learned while riding my bike. And, I get two questions this morning. I've already got it several times. Isn't that seat uncomfortable? And I will tell you, it really was uncomfortable about 8 days in on 8 hours on this thing. I'm glad I brought some special medicine with me. But some people ask me, hey, 18 years, what finally got you to do it after 18 years? And I said, well, I'm not getting any younger. But seriously, our church, Northwest Bible Church, incredibly generous people who love giving money to make sure people are hearing about Jesus all over the world. We have a refugee center 3 miles from our church. Amazing stuff, but we did this survey. And the survey wasn't to find out, do they like the preaching? Because, Dan, they already do like the preaching, right? Okay. A little more energetic next meeting we go to. Okay. Or if they like the music, it really was to say, how are we doing following Jesus? And it wasn't planned, but it was like we had this moment where we confessed to one another that we weren't talking about Jesus to people we had worked with for 25 years. And to the person I was standing next to when my kids are playing soccer. Or my neighbor. You name it. And one of the things I realized after that survey was that, that's just not unique to our church. 1 out of 8 people who go to church on a regular basis or come to a meeting like this, 1 out of 8 talk about Jesus 1 time a week. And that might just be in their own home. And let me say, man, I don't want to discount that, because that might be the place some of us need to start, okay? And the other thing that was just on my heart is I've been senior pastor for 18 years, knowing Dan for 30. I've watched our body become lots more diverse in lots of ways, including politically, and I see just the tension in our country. And people are afraid to talk to anybody about anything. And when Dan said something to me about, hey, Neil, would you like to speak at Wingmen? I said, you bet I'd love to speak to a group of men who are engaged. Because we know that Jesus was looking for an army, and he had a thing called a Great Commission, right? And the church in America today, men, we know that Great Commission that you go out and you have conversations about Jesus is actually become the great omission. And I just want us to look at 1 Peter 3:15 this morning. Let's read this together, guys. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet you do it with gentleness and respect. This is a verse I learned early on. I became a believer through Campus Crusade is what the old guys call it. I was at Louisiana State University, the Harvard of the South. You might, before you laugh and hurt my feelings, you might know it better as the #1 team in the country right now. Okay? Not that that's important to me, okay? But my #1 party buddy, I go down to his room one day. I don't knock. I just open the door, and there's a guy on a couch reading a leather-bound book. I didn't have any leather-bound engineering books. I said, what do you read, man? He goes, the Bible. And I'm like, that's cool. Everybody ought to read the Bible sometime. And to this day, he's a pastor now. He laughs and says, Neil, it was like I was holding a gun to you. So we have some conversation about Jesus. I come to know Jesus, and I learned, I want to have conversations with others. In my time with Crew, I learned the #1 key, this is what I learned at that time, was you got to be bold. And that is important. So I signed up for a trip to Daytona Beach, Florida during spring break. And I'm going to go out there and have conversations with people about Jesus. Now, I hope I'm not exaggerating here, but I'm going to say I'm a sophomore in college, and I weighed a whopping maybe 135 pounds, okay? That might be on the high end. So I'm on the beach. I've got, of course, I couldn't find a swimsuit that fit me. It's like 2 sizes too big. And I go out that day, and I see this guy. He is just ripped. He's about twice as big as me. I'm like, there we go, got to be bold. So I go up to this guy. He's in the surf playing Frisbee. I tap him on the shoulder. I said, excuse me, have you ever made the wonderful discovery of knowing Jesus personally? No, I haven't, and I don't really want to talk to you right now. So I just leave, and as I'm walking away, I'm thinking, wait a minute, got to be bold, right? So I get an idea, something I'd heard somewhere, totally untested, right? So I turn around and I go back up to the guy and I say, hey, do you know that the Bible says why you don't want to talk to me? Looked at me. I could see the wheels turning. No, what does the Bible say why I don't want to talk to you? Well, the Bible says men love the darkness rather than light. And I lived through it to tell you about it today. And we actually had a great conversation about Jesus that day. But I want you to know that 99.999% of the people in our church are never going to do that with somebody. And I'm really glad. And I'm really, really glad in a world where people are like this with each other. And people are waiting to get in a fight. And from 1 Peter 3:15 and some thoughts from my ride, I want to just share 2 other keys for unlocking doors, opening hearts, and having conversations with people about Jesus. And so I'm going to give them to you very simply. The first one is this, men, take Jesus seriously. And I know most of y'all are here because you want to take Jesus seriously. So I want to say a couple things about this. Just 2 words here. When we think about taking Jesus seriously, honor and hope. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord is holy, right? Now, when we honor something, here's what it means. You value it. You value this thing. So here's my bike. Talk about value. This bike was made in Arkansas by at the time, a small bike manufacturer. Last year, about this time, our team, I'm a part of a team of 20 guys. We're called the Rock Riders. I call myself the old, slow mascot of the team. And we were ordering these bikes because we were getting a great deal on the frame. Any cyclists here, I know there's a couple, okay? Cyclists, motorcycle guys, or even cars. Guys, you know this. If you ask a guy, hey, did you get a good deal on your bike, on your car, on your motorcycle? We say, I got a great deal. No man has ever bought a car, a bike, or a motorcycle without getting a great deal on it, okay? And there's some salesperson saying, man, this guy just paid 20% more than the last guy. But you know about great deals. So I got a great deal on this bike, you guys. And it was interesting to begin to hear 20 grown men talking about these bikes. Are we going to get it painted all blue, or are we going to get it all black? Maybe we'll get it blue with a black fade. We begin to sound like my wife when she's talking about dresses with her friends. And we next think, okay, what kind of wheels are you going to get? Are you going to get aluminum or carbon? Are you going to get custom-made wheels? Are you going to buy some stock off the shelf? And what about the drivetrain? Shimano or SRAM? Are you going to get mechanical shifting or electronic shifting? And some guys who had been honoring their bikes, valuing their bikes, became amazingly fluent at talking about a kid's toy. Guys, think about it. Do you see how swiftly and cleanly I just got LSU in the conversation earlier? We are fluent at talking about the things that we value, that we honor. That's why I believe every one of us, it might not be going and talking to a stranger on the street, but it's why I believe that every person here actually can be capable of at least starting conversations about Jesus. You see, our church, after we did that survey, we actually came up with a vision that we're pursuing to our 75th anniversary. And it goes like this. By our 75th anniversary, we will be having thousands of surprisingly easy to start conversations about Jesus all over our city, because we are convinced where God has us is where Jesus is. Where God has us is where Jesus is. Now, I said easy to start. Doesn't mean they'll all be easy. But just that little phrase, where God has us is where Jesus is, I'm going to tell you guys, if you don't remember anything else, when we say where God has us is where Jesus is, we're talking about this, the mystery that Christ is in you. He is the thing, the person you honor. And you know what that means? That when you walk out of here today, wherever you go, whether it's back to your house, to an office, to Starbucks, wherever you go, that means this, that every person who comes into contact with you, who have believed in Jesus, every person has the opportunity to taste, touch, smell, experience Jesus in some kind of way. That's what I'm talking about here. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason, the hope that's in you. So this idea of taking Jesus seriously, honor and hope. The word there, defense, is the word we get apologetics, okay? So when I'm becoming a believer there at LSU, I was so far from God at the time, and but I knew enough from when I went to church as a kid that my life was nothing like whatever it meant to follow Jesus, and the Bible had some things to say about it, and so I wanted to know if the Bible was true. So I started reading some Josh McDowell books. Some of you guys heard of Josh McDowell? So he wrote all those apologetic books. The apologetics that this is talking about is not Josh McDowell. It's about the defense of the hope that's in you. That you, men, are able to say, if I said right now, I want you to turn to the person next to you and I want you to tell why Jesus is your hope today. How the good news of the gospel is good news for you today. That's what that's talking about. So that when I get to talk to people, I'm actually talking about present day reality of Jesus. So this next picture here, this is of Amanda and Keegan. Keegan is working on his Eagle Scout. We were in Lexington, Virginia, home of William and Mary, and I was excited to get to talk to some college students that day. It was getting late. We hadn't gotten many miles in. We were at a restaurant eating lunch. Finally said, come on, team, we got to go. And so our cameraman, we had a professional film crew with us. Our cameraman walks out, and all of a sudden, there's a line of people waiting to talk to us. And different people on our team are having conversations. I talked to a guy from Alaska who, at the end of the time, he's an atheist. He said, okay, I want to read the stories of Jesus. And my wife was talking to these two people, and I said, okay, let's go, y'all. Come on, come on. And my wife comes up to me, and she goes, Neil, you need to talk to Amanda and Keegan. I'm like, Vila, why do I need to talk to them? You talked to them already. She said, they've been waiting 45 minutes. I'm like, Vila, come on, we don't have time for conversations about Jesus here. I want to go. I kid you not. And if you know my wife, Dan knows her, she can give me this look. She said, Neil, you are going to talk to them about Jesus right now. And you know what I said? Yes, ma'am. That's right. So we get in this conversation. Next thing, and y'all, here's all I'm doing. I'm just being curious, kind, and respectful. That's what you can do today. You can go out and be curious, kind, and respectful, knowing Jesus in you, asking people about their stories. Somehow, she offers up to me, she feels disconnected from God, and we just start pursuing that. She tells me this. I found my mother in her bed dead after she committed suicide. And I don't know what to say, and it's all I'm thinking about is this. What is the hope in me right now? And so here's what I said. So Amanda, what's your hope? What are you hoping for? What's your dream? She talks a little. She kind of changes the conversation a little bit and talks about art and says she feels like God gave her art, feels disconnected from that. We are wrapping up our conversation. And I said, Amanda, I want to give you something. And I had a Gospel of Mark with me that was ESV journaling Bible that means every other page was blank, where you can take notes or draw a picture. And I tell her, hey, sometimes I draw a picture, take notes in these blank pages. I said, Amanda, why don't you start reading the stories of Jesus? Because I think God cares about you. I think he cares about your art. I think he cares about your disconnection from God. She says, thank you, I'll start doing that. I start walking away. I said, Amanda, would you do me a favor? Would you send me a picture when you draw your first picture in there? About a month later, she sends me that. And Amanda stayed in contact with us. Just being curious, kind, and respectful, taking Jesus seriously, talking about the hope that's in us. Okay? That's one of the keys. And I got a place with Amanda that boldness alone would not have gotten me, just because I'm thinking about hope, right? So here's the second thing I want to say in light of our verse here. Let's put the verse back up, brother. In light of our verse here, it says, you do it, you have these conversations with people with gentleness and respect. So my second thing is this, that we just go out of here today, we're taking Jesus seriously, and we take people seriously. Now, and guys, I want to say, in our culture right now, I'm talking about the people who are different than us. I'm talking about the people who are on the other side of an aisle from us, that we just say, I'm going to take people seriously. I'll show you a picture here of a guy. This is Charles, who you saw in the video. Charles is a Native American of the Laguna tribe. I wish I had time to tell you his whole story. He gives me that piece of pottery. Our conversation started this way. I don't have time to talk to you. He ends up giving us this gift. And I will tell you, I had not spent any time in a significant conversation with a Native American before this trip. And here's the thing, I would visit with these Native Americans and I could see the walls going up. And it just hit me that when I move into your life, even when I come into your life today, I got to speak with Rod a little this morning and just being reminded that when I'm walking into somebody's life, I'm actually walking on holy ground. And that I really want to take people seriously. And people are afraid. We are working on a book, and my agent is in Boston, works out of New York. He said this to me, he said, Neil, if you come up here and talk about Jesus, we are afraid of you. Getting to have some cool conversations with him right now. So back to the verse here, taking people seriously. I want to give you two words to think about today, guys, when we think about that. The words gentleness and respect, okay? Gentleness and respect. Word gentleness, you know, it doesn't mean that we don't have power. It doesn't mean that you don't have an agenda. It means this, that the power you have as a man in our society, whatever position God has you in, whatever gifts God has given you, you're taking that power and you're putting that power under control for the good of another. Got it? Taking that power, putting it under control for the good of another, for the glory of Jesus. So I want to show you a picture here of Tamika. That's Tamika. Now, I pull up to Tamika's house. There's papers all over that front porch when I first pull up. Tamika's looking at me, and she is scared to death. Because, you know, there's a mammal standing in front of her. Y'all know what a mammal is, right? A middle-aged man in Lycra, okay? So I pull in, this middle-aged man in Lycra, and there's Tamika, and you can see that Tamika and I, we have different skin colors. I come up, and I say, hey, give her my spill. I say, Tamika, can we talk with you? And she's like, I don't have time. And I said, how about 7 minutes? And I'm very aware. And some of this I learned through Jeffrey and other Native Americans. I need to be gentle here. So I'm keeping my distance with Tamika. And she agrees to give me 7 minutes. We kind of pick up all her papers. And you'll see that yappy dog of hers. There was 2 of them. And I'm going to tell you, I was exercising gentleness, even holding that dog, okay? I hope Tamika doesn't hear this. So anyway, I'm holding that cute little sweet dog. And Tamika's very flat while we're talking. And I'm aware in my mind that our cameraman is not going to be enjoying this interview. I can just tell he's going to think this is bad, but I want to talk to Tamika. And all of a sudden, Tamika says, do you have time for one more story? I can't tell you how many times when people started believing we were going to be curious, kind, and respectful, they'd say, do you have time for one more story? And then she starts heating up. And she's telling me that she was on her porch that day because she was having to take another job because her supervisor, who was a white lady, had been treating her terribly. And I just stopped and I said, hey, Tamika, I feel some heat coming from you. And she says, how would you have responded if you had experienced that kind of racism? And I took a breath. And I fumbled with some words, and then finally I looked at her and I said, Tamika, I am sorry that you were treated like that by a person who looks like me. Will you forgive me? And we had this amazing continued conversation about church and some awkward experiences she had in church, about her desire to come to Dallas sometime. And, you know, whatever you think about my response, here's the deal. I'm just trying to take Jesus seriously. And I'm going to put aside as much as I can put aside to be gentle with Tamika and talk to her about Jesus. Gentleness and respect. The word respect, you know, that word comes from the word fear. And I think of God saying to Moses, take off your shoes. You're walking on holy ground. And again, this idea of when we're entering people's lives, when you enter somebody's life today, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to take this person seriously. And I'm walking into the holy ground of their life, right? So this picture here, this couple, this was a day we hadn't got many miles in. It was like 2 o'clock. We'd only gone 30 miles. We have 70 more to go. And I've been stopping here and there talking to people. And we're passing this little hill with this RV there. And I'm like, boy, the guy's washing his bike. I got to stop. And I said, no, my team is about to kill me. So I was passing and somebody said, hey, there's a conversation. I said, great. You gave me permission. I'm going. We pull up. And right away, he says, hey, I say, hey, you up for this conversation? He says, yes, let me go in and warn my wife so she can brush her hair. And he comes out, and they just usher us into the holy ground of their lives. Immediately, he says, we are both divorced. We have been married 3 years. We have sold everything we have. We're living in this RV, traveling the country. We do not have a lot of money. We're very frugal, and on and on. I'm like, whoa. And she starts talking about her background, that she had this Baptist background that she walked away from. And they said something that I've heard many, many times in my conversations. I love to go to Colorado during the summer. I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody say, this is my church out here when we're hiking, you know. And so I thought, well, here's an opportunity. Here's my door. And I say to her, and isn't it amazing to think that Jesus made all of this? When I said, isn't it amazing, Jesus made all this, here's what she did. Big eye roll. And you know what she was doing in that moment? It was like she was closing the door. You know what I did not do? I did not push the door back open. I just backed off, and I started talking with him, and we started talking about rural America and the poverty. I was with a pastor friend of mine that day who had joined us that day, and he kind of was challenging me about why I didn't challenge her. And I had to think about this. You know, as we ended the conversation, I had this elbow that was bleeding that day because at the very start of our day, we're in a parking lot. We hadn't pedaled one stroke. I'm on my bike and I just fall over. and cut my elbow because, I'm a pro now. I've been riding it for 28 days at this point. And the team looked at me, and nerves were very, very raw at that point. And I was like, come on, let's just go. And when I first pulled up, she said, hey, can I fix your elbow for her? And I just, no, come on, let's talk, And totally kind of disrespected her. I wasn't even thinking about it in my mind. So as we're ending the conversation, I had this thought. I said, hey, would you still like to take care of my elbow? And she said, you bet. She runs into her trailer, pulls out their medical kit, and it was like the doors opened wide open again with her. And you guys, the most important thing that happened in that conversation, I believe, was this, that I allowed her, I respected her enough to say, even in this conversation where I'm wanting to talk to you about Jesus, you are a human being made in the image of God, and you have a gift for me today, and I'm willing to receive it. Gentleness and respect. You guys, I believe that every guy here can start a conversation about Jesus. I mean, you might not get somebody to quote unquote the finish line, and my goal on this trip was not to have people sign on a dotted line, because I wanted to have the kind of conversations that we have with the people we live with day in and day out. A lot of times those conversations aren't easy. I've had a guy on my bike team, one of my best buddies, wouldn't talk to me for 3 months after a conversation we had about Jesus. He's totally anti-church, Jesus, the whole thing. But in the book of Acts, there are times where God was giving people favor, and people, whether they agreed or not, received it. I want to close just to encourage y'all. I made some videos I was sending back to our church, and this is with Mark, and Mark served in the armed forces, and Diana, the lady you saw earlier, and just to kind of see their response, even though they didn't agree, their response about just having the conversation. Thank you guys for getting to be here today with you.